Hi, welcome to the All Things LGBTQ interview show, where we interview LGBTQ guests who are making important contributions to our communities.
All Things LGBTQ is taped at Orca Media in Montpelier, Vermont, which we recognize as being unceded Indigenous land.
Thanks for joining us and enjoy the show.
I'm here with Becca Balint. It's our great pleasure and honor to host her today. Becca, you're very busy, so I really appreciate your taking time to talk with us.
Very happy to be here. I'm glad it worked out that we could find time that worked for both of us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And since you're a national figure now, I'd like to review a couple of key points of your biography, if I may.
Sure.
It's not to be forgotten that you're the first woman and openly LGBTQ person to represent Vermont in Congress.
That's right.
You have a BA from Smith, where you graduated magna cum laude with Phi Beta Kappa.
Yeah.
You have a double master's, one in education from Harvard and one in history from UMass Amherst. You're married to notable attorney and opera singer Elizabeth Wall. You're the mother of two teenagers and the human companion to a dog named Wheelie. Is Wheelie still around?
Wheelie's still around, you betcha.
Very good. You taught middle school in Windham County for 14 years. You started your political career in the Vermont legislature. This is your second term in Congress. You're a member of the House Judiciary and Budget Committees. And you're the author of The Girl in the Yellow Pantsuit. And I'd like to show this book right now because that was the occasion of our last interview 2.5 years ago.
Whoa, that's crazy.
And I was looking at the collection. It's an essay collection. I've recommended it to all my friends, and it really is smart and inspiring. So I suggest the audience pick it up and read it if you haven't already. So in our last interview, we talked about the noise level in the public and in the culture and in politics. Yeah. And in 2.5 years, the noise level has increased to the point where it's almost deafening at points.
Yes.
And I listened to your updates that you put online, and it seems like there's a constant drumbeat of lies, executive orders.
Yes.
And so my first question to you is, how do you determine what issues to address and which to pass on? I recall seeing a post where you said, look, Trump is not going to be able to have another term, so just don't pay attention to that. So how do you figure out what to pay attention to?
Well, this is really challenging for me and my team, and I just need to give a terrific shout out to my team, both in Vermont and in DC. I could not do the job without the hard work of my staff. And so we're constantly reevaluating. There are issues that are particular to Vermont that is critically important that we continue to stay focused on that. Certainly ongoing FEMA relief and climate resiliency. This is going to continue to impact Vermont, so it's really important. The mental health crisis across the state and the housing crisis. So those three things are always issues that we are focused on. Broadly, I ran on a campaign of really being deeply concerned about the slide towards authoritarianism and autocracy across the globe. And so we are always looking for those stories that go directly to that issue of what is this administration doing that is clearly out of an authoritarian playbook. And we can get into that more later, but there's a scandal, not just every day, it's every hour. And so there are times when I huddle with my team, and actually I sat with my comms director yesterday, and we went through, I had flagged a bunch of different articles, and for us to figure out, okay, that one feels like either the cycle's moved on or there's a hook that makes, that Vermonters will care about. We'll go back to that one. But it's really about trying to determine that every single day is looking to see what rises to the challenge. And then, of course, rises to the intensity of what we should be talking about. And then, of course, in the mix of all that, you have issues that pop up unexpectedly, whether it is, of course, a plane crash, or whether it is a situation where a colleague dies, or so. It is a constant give and take. And I wish that I could clone myself sometimes to be covering all of these things at once. And we really try to not just have my thinking about it, but huddle with the team, talk to other teams on the Hill. What do you think is important for us to put out? The extent to which we can work with other offices and say, well, they can take the lead on that. We'll support them in that. We'll take the lead on this other thing. So it's a constant give and take. But it's not a sprint. What we're dealing with right now with this administration is not a sprint. It's not even a marathon. It is, a tough mutter for those of you who do those kinds of races, or an ultra marathon. And so we do have to pace ourselves and make sure we're also helping constituents focus on the right things. But it's challenging.
Oh, I bet. And then, of course, the national media contacts you and asks you for comments.
Yes.
Periodically. I just saw some yesterday.
Yes, exactly.
I was privileged enough to attend your town hall at the Chandler, where you talked about the arts and humanities. It was a community conversation and call to action. And it was very inspiring. And I encourage the audience to tune in. It's up on YouTube. And I watched it again yesterday. And the moderator asked you a really interesting question. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on your response. She
Sure.
implied that people are sort of trashing Congress for not doing enough. And your response, I thought, was really interesting, because you said in the interview that, or in response, that a lot of people are doing really good work behind the scenes. And there are stars like Jasmine Crockett and AOC, but there are a lot of people doing really good work, and they don't get credit, and we don't see it. So I was wondering if you wouldn't mind, if you would talk.
I would love to.
A few specifics and names about what's going on behind the scenes.
I really would love to. Let me give you a perfect example of this. And I'm going to name 4 members of Congress and tell you, where they're from and what they did for the American people. So I think as some people who have been following politics this week know, the Republicans have been trying to shove through a pretty extreme bill through Congress. It makes cuts to Medicaid. It makes cuts to food assistance. It delivers a lot of tax breaks to billionaires and wealthy corporations at the expense of working people. And there are 4 members of a very critical committee. It's called the Rules Committee. And in Congress, whichever party is in control, they control all the committees. And that's true with the Rules Committee too. So Republicans get to have more members on that committee. They get to drive the agenda day in and day out in all the committees, including the Rules Committee. And so every bill essentially has to go through the Rules Committee process. And so there are 4 members from the Democratic side. The ranking member, so the highest ranking member on the Democratic side, is a man named Jim McGovern. He represents a district in Massachusetts. And also on that committee with him are Teresa Leger Fernandez. She represents New Mexico. Joe Neguse, he represents Colorado. And Mary Gay Scanlon, who I believe, oh gosh, I should know if she's Maryland or Virginia. No, she's Pennsylvania. I got it. It was in the right file. It's Pennsylvania. I dare to say that most Americans have never heard of Jim McGovern, Mary Gay Scanlon, Joe Neguse, or Teresa Leger Fernandez. Correct. They were our heroes this week. And let me tell you why. They were the ones in the middle of the night, because the Rules Committee chair called the meeting for 1 a.m. in the morning. And they had to show up at 1 a.m. in the morning. And some of them were then up for 36 hours straight, going toe to toe with Republicans in their committee to try to thwart the worst parts of this bill. and you can watch it on C-SPAN. The entire hearing in the Rules Committee was televised, and we, as members of Congress on the Democratic side, we took shifts supporting them. So I went in a little after 4 a.m. There were people who were there from 1 to 4, then some of us took over at 4, just to give them support, because what they were doing was extraordinary. And many of them had what we call little viral moments, but the only people who really see them are the government nerds. Like, I know that they did this amazing thing. And so I always try to highlight for folks, don't necessarily believe the hype and the narrative coming out of mainstream media as it is. They're trying to sell papers, they're trying to get eyeballs. And so it is to their advantage to have this narrative of Democrats aren't doing anything, there's all this Democratic infighting, when you've got a perfect example of people giving every single ounce of energy they have to fight on behalf of all of us, and you don't hear about it. And I want to also highlight, in the case of Jim McGovern just lost his daughter to cancer. I don't even think it's been 2 weeks yet. He's exhausted, he's distraught, he's grieving, and he still showed up to do his damn job. And in the early morning hours, he made an impassioned speech about NIH funding and how, he knows that his daughter's life was prolonged because of NIH funding, and the Trump administration should not be cutting it. And so those are the things people will never see. And there are some people who they went into public service and they're introverts. They're never going to be the ones in committee who are going to try to have those viral moments. They're just not. But they are doing the hard work. They're not going to be the ones who run in front of the cameras. They're not going to be the ones that, are seen, screaming at either at or with activists in the halls of Congress. But without them, we don't have the front lines in the committees. And so I have really tried to make it a very important part of the work that I do, is to uplift these voices. Here's another one, Jill Takuda. She is a member from Hawaii. She was voted the most effective member in the 118th Congress for figuring out how to get legislation through. And she serves on committees that allow her to do more bipartisan work than some of us. I don't have a lot of partners in judiciary with Jim Jordan leading it, but so nobody, most people don't know Jill Takuda, but what happens sometimes at her town halls is people say, well, why can't you be like X, right? And she's like, do you want me to be an effective legislator or do you not? Because I was just voted the most effective one. And yet you're telling me what I should be doing is doing this other thing. I would say, let Jasmine Crockett be Jasmine Crockett, let Jill Takuda be Jill Takuda, and let's not further this narrative that there's only a handful of people doing the work, because it's just not true.
That is a really important message, Becca. So thank you for sharing it.
Yeah, you're welcome.
To hear it, You mentioned in the last interview 2.5 years ago that you read 3 newspapers a day.
Yeah.
That changed? Where do you get your information now? And are there any thinkers and writers whose insights you find particularly valuable?
Oh my goodness.
Time to read? I mean, I wonder,
Yeah, no, I still read. I can't read as much as I once did, but it's still a big part of my life. And so I would say one thing that has changed is that I follow a lot more threads on social media, because I can look at a bunch of thinkers very, very quickly and see, what is Ann Applebaum saying? What is she posting about? Who's she linking to? I can follow, of course, Heather Cox Richardson and a whole bunch of other people. And it has opened up my world to other thinkers because they're referencing them in the posts that they're making. I still look through all of the headlines in the New York Times, the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, Politico, The Hill, all of these outlets that some are specific to DC. But a change that I've made is reserving my weekends for more reading more long form material. And so I'll give you an example. Back in January, I was reading a book, and I don't have it with me, so I can't give you the exact title, but there's a professor at Amherst College named Catherine Sanderson, and she had done some interesting work on bystander psychology. Like, what does it mean to be a more active, bystander in terms of just not letting things happen, but how do you find your voice to be able to speak up when something is not right? And so I just cold called her. I reached out to her. I said, I just read your book. I thought it was really interesting. Do you have a half hour to just hop on a Zoom with me? Can we talk through some of those ideas? I want to understand it better as it applies to Congress, because I see people who know that what they're doing is wrong, but they can't seem to find their voice. So she's very gracious with her time. And then that was months ago. And then she cold called me. She's like, I happen to be in DC. I am here for a conference. Can I stop by the office? We had another great talk about the work that she's doing, and I love that as a member of Congress. For the most part, I can cold call authors, thinkers, researchers, writers, and most times they get back to me. And that is an incredible gift that I have been given by having Congresswoman in front of my name. And I am trying to take advantage of it. I have reached out to professors in California who do research on hope, people who research what awe does to our brains, looking at how we as Donna Hicks, who does research on dignity, she was gracious enough to give me her time. So weekends are really set aside for me to actually read books and not just do these little tiny, snippets here and there. But reading is still a huge part of my life. The hardest part for me is I'm still very much a writer, and that's what I don't have a lot of time for. And so I'm having to write in very short form, whether it is preparing for a 1-minute speech on the floor or preparing speeches. But I miss having that time to really write essays that require me to make a lot of different connections. And this is the struggle for me right now, is where do I carve that time out? But yeah, those are some of the changes. I love that question. Because it forces me to think about it. Yeah.
Because I was worried, because you're everywhere being interviewed, and I know you're very busy, but that I know you recognize that as an important part of one's life.
Absolutely. And recently too, I actually gave a little bit of a pep talk to my staff. I don't know if it was this week or last week, saying, hey, we all know that meditation can help people to self-regulate, to recharge. But there was this study I'd come across that sustained reading has that same impact. It puts you a little bit into I'm going to get the word wrong, but it is that same kind of thing of giving your brain a break. And so I was looking at this study that was looking at 20 minutes, 20 minutes of reading. And I was saying, get yourself off the screen, actually take out a book or a magazine that does long form articles, and turn your brain to something else. And that I know I can't stop reading for all kinds of reasons, but also because I know it's healthy for my brain. Oh, the other thing that has changed, while I drive a lot around Vermont. And so I listen to a lot of books on Audible, and I've got the Tim Snyder book. I think it's the latest one on freedom that's going. I also have one from Ezra Klein on abundance going. So, as I'm driving, I'll stick a chapter, up so I can listen to it on Audible. But we can't stop seeking out knowledge just because we are in Congress and we are scheduled in 20-minute increments. I still need to be making myself a more educated person. So I don't imagine that will ever go away for me. It's a big part of who I am.
That's great, because it's centering and grounding,
Yes, it is.
Out of your own, even out of the everyday, struggles. And
you know what else? The other thing it does, Anne, is it forces you to think about, what if I'm wrong? You know what I mean? What if
Yes.
I'm wrong? What if I am not looking at this in a way that is more expansive? Or what did we get wrong with a policy that we implemented? That if we're only reading things that reinforce what we already believe, we're doing ourselves a disservice, but certainly as members of Congress, we're doing a great disservice to our constituents. There should always be a space for reading material that challenges you about your beliefs.
And what I like about Anne Applebaum is her grasp of European history.
Oh my goodness,
Like,
yes.
And Heather Cox Richardson knows US history back and forth. So, I mean, those
Yes.
are great choices.
And it helps us to understand too, when are we at a moment that is unprecedented in this country? And when have we seen the playbook before, right? Because there are important lessons to be drawn from each of those scenarios. And yes, Anne Applebaum just completely and totally blows me away. She did a fantastic podcast with The Atlantic called Autocracy in America. I think it's about 8 episodes. And I strongly recommend it if people are into podcasts. I'm still reaching out to people that I heard on her podcast to try to set up phone conversations with them so I can understand more about how we move from this moment, given that there's so much this administration that they're doing that is, it's authoritarian, ism 101. And so,
You know it.
and I know that's scary to say, and I know sometimes, in Vermont, I will get criticized by people who are supporters of Donald Trump, who believe that I'm being alarmist. And I gotta tell you, especially for the colleagues of mine who are Republicans, who will tell you when the cameras aren't rolling, no, this is dangerous, what's happening. And so it is, my beef with Trumpism is not with the people in Vermont who voted for Trump for economic reasons. That we have incredible economic disparity in this country, and rural America is dying. And so I always say my beef is not with you. You chose the person that you thought was going to make your life better, because that essentially is how most people make their decisions in the voting booth. I said, but I still have to be a check on the power of the executive branch. That is literally my job as a member of Congress. And that's, that takes us all into too, that there's so much misunderstanding right now about 3 branches of government, just broadly. And I see it in questions that I get, whether it's in Vermont, but also I do national call-in shows on C-SPAN, and it's shocking to me. And this also drives the anxiety and the fear when you don't fully understand how our own system of government works. And as a former social studies and history teacher, it just makes me incredibly worried for the future and very sad.
These are very dire times, as you observed.
Yeah.
And so I think now, if it's okay with you, I'd like to turn to the idea of joy.
Yes, please.
When you were at the Chandler, you drew our attention to the sparkly shoes that you were wearing
Yes.
to remind us all of the importance of joy in our lives. And in your book, you talk about your self-care practices like meditation, hiking, walking, and music.
Yes.
Are these still your self-care? Do you get to hike? And I love that you got an apartment far enough away so that you can walk to work in Washington.
Yes. Yes. So I walk to work every day. I
Uh-huh.
also am lucky enough, I prioritized walking distance to the Capitol. It's not a fancy apartment. It's a little bit of a hole in the wall, but I'm on the 2nd floor of this, this old brick building. And I have actually a little outdoor balcony that overlooks an alley that has tons of trees in it. So I actually do a lot of bird watching and bird listening out there. That is a big part of trying to get me set up for my day. Yes, exercise. And when I'm back in Vermont, I always hike with my dog in the woods. Absolutely. I also, as I think we've talked about, I have a mad shoe collection. I'm pretty staid up top, business up top in my suit, party on the feet, because it brings me joy, but it also brings so many people joy on the hill who are having a bad day. And then they'll see some bright shoes in the elevator and it'll spark a smile. I've also experimented. I read a book on sort of the joy that comes from things unexpected. And so one of the suggestions that this woman had was to take one of the buttons on your suit, take off the dark colored button and put on a bright colored button. So I did that on one of my suits, and I've got these two bright orange buttons. And I find whenever I look at them, it makes me smile and brings some joy. We got to get back to finding ways to connect with each other, and those kinds of little signals to people are points of connection. And I play music. Most recently, I don't know if you saw, I performed probably a year ago in a congressional variety show. Did you see this?
I'm so glad you mentioned that because we want to show it. We want to, but
Yeah. And so I did that. I'm going to be doing another variety show, congressional variety show this year. I'm performing I think I'm working on a Indigo Girl song that I'm working on. And I've also, I was in a contra dance band for years, and my mandolin's been sitting in the corner. And a few months ago, I decided to take it out again. And I'm having a ball just getting back into playing mandolin. And I couldn't do my job well without those things in my life and setting aside time for them. And we laugh a lot in my office. We laugh a lot.
This is my next question. I'd like to show, after you explain a little how you got involved with Across the Great Divide with Natalie Pressman at the Congressional Record. Can you tell us how that came about? And then we'd like to show it and then close out.
Sounds great. Yes. So
it's really a fabulous performance. It brings
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Well, let me tell you, Anne, before I talk about it, a dear friend of mine in Vermont hadn't known. It's so funny. Like, people in different parts of your world. She texted me. She was like, I thought it was AI generated at first. And I said, you did? She's like, yeah, I had no idea you could sing or play guitar. I was like, no, it's really me. So I am a huge fan of a performer who passed away this year, Nancy Griffith, who was a wonderful singer-songwriter, also did a lot of terrific covers of songs. And one of her albums was called Other Voices, Other Rooms. And she covered an old folk song by Kate Wolf called Across the Great Divide. And it's a beautiful song. It's a haunting song. It's really about thinking about death. And it's been a huge, like, it's one of my favorite songs. And so it's always something that I love to even just play on my own. And so the Library of Congress was coordinating an event with the magazine or the newspaper Roll Call, and put a call out to all of the members of Congress. Hey, we're trying to do this. It's going to highlight a lot of amazing programs we have through the Library of Congress. They always say, would your boss be willing to do something? And as it goes in Congress, like, I'm a yes gal. I'm like, yeah, sure. And then they come back around and they're like, remember when you said yes to that? They're like, yeah, it's actually coming up, and the sound check is next week. And so they said, we have this amazing trombonist, singer-songwriter, Natalie Cressman, who's going to be in town. And we floated the idea of you doing it together. And it was just so much fun. I mean, nerve-wracking, because it's one thing to sing with a bunch of friends, or in my case, I also was a program director at a camp. It's one thing to sing with a bunch of kids and staff around a campfire. It's another thing to be in Washington, D.C. on a stage in front of hundreds of people, including your peers, and need to perform. But I had so much fun, and coming out of that, and it was bipartisan. That's the other thing I want people to understand. We did a couple numbers. It was Democrats and Republicans together, still trying to find ways to connect. And I was just talking with my buddy, Morgan McGarvey. He represents Louisville, Kentucky. He's a wonderful guitarist. And I was saying, oh, we gotta get a number going for the next one. So that's how it came about. And it was a really wonderful evening of music. And I got to see my colleagues who I had no idea had talent in that way, which was super fun.
Well, audience, we're going to roll it now, but also it's on YouTube if you want to listen to it again. It really brings me a lot of joy, and you can tell you're having a good time. So let's
Absolutely.
roll the tape now.
Congressional Record. Please welcome to the stage the Honorable Becca Balint of Vermont and special guest Natalie Cressman performing Kate Wolf's Across the Great Divide.
I've been walking in my sleep, counting troubles instead of counting sheep. Where the years went, I can't say. I just turned around and they're gone away. And I've been sifting through the layers of dusty books and faded papers that tell a story that I used to know. It was one that happened so long ago. It's gone away. And yesterday, now I find myself on the mountainside where the rivers change direction across the great divide. Now I hear the owl calling softly as the night was falling with a question, and I replied, but he's gone across the borderline. It's gone away yesterday. Now I find myself on the mountainside where the rivers change direction across the great divide. Finest hour I have seen is the one that comes between the edge of night and the break of day. It's when the darkness rolls away. It's gone away yesterday. Now I find myself on the mountainside where the rivers change direction across the great divide. It's gone away yesterday. Now I find myself on the mountainside
Congresswoman Balint and Natalie Cressman, everybody.
What a hoot that is. Becca,
Yes.
Balint, you're a force for good in the world. You're fighting the good fight. I really appreciate your joining us, and I hope you'll come back and see us soon.
I will. Thank you, Ann.
Thank you for joining us. And until next time, remember, resist.